So you don't have a calculator, and you want to be able to calculate percentages by hand. How do you do it? Well, this video will show you how it's done. So in our first example, 5/7. Now how do we convert that to a percent without using a calculator if we want to just do it by hand? Well, here's the process. First thing you do is you add 2 zeros to the end of the numerator, top number, and then set up the division like so. 5, add 2 zeros to get 500. You put it inside this bracket here, sort of underneath here. So you got 500. And then to the left, on the outside of the bracket, you have 7. Okay, so you have 7 and 500, and how do you handle this? First thing you look at is the 5. Does 7 divide into 5? No. Because 5 is smaller than 7. So now you take another 0, and you have 50. So does 7 divide into 50? Yes, it does. How many times? Well, this is where knowing your multiplication tables will help you a lot. The highest multiple 7 that can go into 50 is 49, which is 7 times 7. Because 7 times 8 is 56, which is too large. 7 times 7 is 49. So you go, you write a 7 on up here, right on top of where this 0 is. 7. 7 times 7 is 49. And you write the 49 down here. In the same column as where you wrote the 7 up here, you write 49. Okay, so 50 minus 49 then is 1. So you write 1. And then this other 0, you bring it down here. So now you have 10. Okay, so now we repeat the process. We have 10. How many times can 7 be pulled out of 10? Well, only once. Because 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 2 is 14. So 14 is obviously too big, so 7 times 1 is 7. We write the 1 right up here in this slot, in this column here, right next to the 7. And then we go 7 times 1 is 7. 10 minus 7 is 3. Okay, so we got 71 up here. We got 3 down here. What do we do next? Well, we can add a 0. We treat this as 30. Well, we add a decimal 0. So this is 3.0, but we're going to treat it like 30. How many times can 7 go into 30? Well, if you count by 7, 7, 14, 21, 28. And then the next one is 35, which is too big. 7 times 4 is 28. So you write 28 down here with the decimal in place because that's where the decimal is slotted. But you write 2.8 because we're thinking of it about being 28, even though in reality it's 2.8. So rewrite that in there because 7 times 4 is 28. And we write a 4 in this column here after the decimal. So we got 3.0 minus 2.8 gives us 0.2. And then if we want to get another decimal, we add another 0 and we go, how many times does 7 fit into 20? Well, it fits in twice because 14 is less than 20, but 21 is bigger than 20. So we write 2 in here. 7 times 2 is 14. 20 minus 14 is 6. And then if we wanted to keep getting more decimals over here, we would keep continuing that same process. But we only, for this exercise, we're only going to have answers to one decimal place. So we need them to two decimal places here to figure out whether we round up or down. So for this, in this case, we obviously see that the 2 is less than 5, so our final answer here just rounds to 71.4. Answer, 71.4%. Oops, it's cut off here at the bottom of the screen. Answer, 71.4%. Next example, 21 divided by 31. How do we convert that into percent without using a calculator? Well, follow the same steps as last time. You take your numerator, 21, you add 2 zeros at the end, you put it inside of this bracket, and then you take the denominator, the 31, you put it outside the bracket here, and then let's take a look at what we've got. 2,100 divided by 31. So you start by looking at the 2. 2 is smaller than 31, so we can't do anything. 21 is smaller than 31, so we still can't do anything. 210 is bigger than 31, so we have to figure out how many times can we take 31 out of 210. Okay, so we're dealing with a 2-digit number dividing into a 3-digit number, so that's going to be hard to deal with. A trick is to do this, just take the 3 and the 21. How many times does 3 go into 21? Well, it goes 7 times. The problem is, if we go 31 times 7, we'll get 217, which is bigger than 210. So we have to use the number that's less than it. So instead of using 7, we use 6. So we write a 6 up here, right above the first 0 here. And we go 31 times 6 is 186. And then we subtract. 210 minus 186 gives you 24. And then we have this extra 0 here, we can just bring it down. So we actually have 240. Okay, so what's next? We got to figure out how many times 31 gets taken out of 240. Again, we can use that trick where we just take the 3 and the 24. How many times does 3 go into 24? Well, 8 times, because 8 times 3 is 24. But then again, 31 times 8 will give us 248, which is too large. So we'll use 7 instead. So we put the 7 right up here in this column, right next to the 6, right in line with the step that we're working on. And then we take 7 times 31 equals 217. So we write 217 here, and then we subtract. 240 minus 217 equals 23. Next step, we can add decimal 0. And then we say, okay, how many times does 31 go into 230? Once again, use the same trick as before. How many times does 3 go into 23? Well, it goes 7 times, because 7 times 3 is 21. 8 times 3 is 24, which is too big. So then we test it out. We'd say, okay, well, what if we took 7 times 31? We'd get 217. Okay, so that's what we use. We use the 7, put it in this slot. 7 times 31 is 217. So we write 217 in there with the decimal place in its usual spot. Subtract the 2 and we get 1.3, or I guess 13 with the decimal place in there. Once again, we can add another 0 and repeat the process. How many times does 31 fit into 130? Well, how many times does 3 fit into 13? It fits 4 times. We take 4 times 31, we get 124. We write 124 right there with the decimal in its usual spot. And the 4 up here in right next to the 7. 31 times 4 gives us 124. Subtract, we get 0.06. And then if you wanted to keep getting more and more decimals, you could just keep repeating the same process. But we've gone far enough for our purposes. We can now round this to say 67.7%. Answer, 67.7%. For our third example, we want to know if this can also work if the numerator is bigger than the denominator. As it turns out, yes, it does. We can handle it the exact same way. Add 2 zeros to the numerator and set up the division like so. So 125, add 2 zeros, put it inside of this bracket, put the 89, the denominator, out here to the left of the bracket, and away we go. How many times does 89 fit into 125? Well, the way we can handle it is to say how many times does 8 go into 12? Well, obviously only once, right? Because 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 1 is 8. So then we take the 1 and we try it. 89 times 1 is just 89, which is smaller than 125, so that's good. Put the 1 up here. Put the 89 down here so that it lines up. Subtract 125 minus 89 equals 36. And now since we have 2 zeros hanging around, we can bring them both down. So now we have 3,600. Okay. Now how many times does 89 go into 360? Well, how many times does 8 go into 36? Well, 8 times 4 is 32. 8 times 5 is 40. So 4 is the biggest number that can fit. So then we try 89 times 4. What does that give us? 89 times 4 gives us 356. And if you want to know how to multiply these types of numbers by hand, I'll do that in another video. But for right now, we know that 89 times 4 is 356. Write 356 down here. Write the 4 up here so that 89 times 4 gives you 356. Subtract 360 minus 356 to give you 4. Bring down the 0 to give you 40. Alright, so at this point, how do we handle this? Because we have 40, which is smaller than 89. 89 does not divide into 40 at all. So the way we handle this is to put a 0 in the spot that we're working with. This slot right here. 89 times 0 gives you 0. Subtract to give you 40. Now we're at the part where we can put decimal and then add a 0. So now we're dealing with 400. 89 goes into 400 how many times? Well, let's see. 8 goes into 45 times. So then we test that. 89 times 5. Well, that gives us a number well above 400, so that's no good. 89 times 4 will give us 356, like we saw before. So now we put a 4 in this slot to the right of the decimal. 89 times 4 gives you 356. Subtract those to give you 400, or excuse me, gives you 44. Decimal spot has to be in its usual spot. Since we're on to the next step, add a 0. How many times does 89 go into 440? Well, let's see. How many times does 8 go into 44? It goes in 5 times. Problem is 89 times 5 gives you 445, I believe. 445 is larger than 440, so we have to use 4 instead. 89 times 4 gives you 356. So put a 4 in this spot. 89 times 4 gives you 356. Subtract to give you 0.84. Or you could think of it as 84 or 0.84, either way. But the point is, now we've gone far enough. We have enough decimals that we can get our final answer. Our final answer is 140.4%.